Hello, everybody. We are expecting severe weather across the United States today, bringing the risk of mostly wind, hail, and possibly a tornado or two. The date is Saturday, June 7th, 2025, and let's get right into the forecast. Here's our day one convective outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, and we can see that we are expecting a large swath of severe weather extending from western Texas all the way to the eastern coast, extending up into the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. And there's even a little tongue of marginal risk up here in North Dakota and Minnesota. Our main focuses today are going to be the western Texas and Oklahoma panhandle, as long as the Texarkana region, extending through the Dixie Alley all the way to the eastern United States, with an enhanced risk of severe weather across northern Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, extending into southern Tennessee. This is going to be caused by a mostly wind threat with a moderate wind risk in our enhanced risk area caused by a mesoscale convective system or a line of storms. Along with this is a slight risk of hail in this area caused by our mesoscale convective system and later storms along a cold front. And up here in the western Texas and Oklahoma panhandle, there is a threat for a discrete cell or two, bringing that slight risk for hail. Additionally, there is a threat for a tornado or two today, with our largest area of concern around this threat in our more eastern slight and enhanced risk area, which is also going to be caused by the mesoscale convective system and those storms initiated by that cold front later tonight. Additionally, we have a double barrel marginal tornado risk back in Texas, highlighting that small risk for tornadoes in those regions. Tomorrow looks like it's going to be the big day of our severe weather event with a day two moderate risk over the southern Oklahoma and Texas border, along with an enhanced risk extending up into central Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Panhandle, and possibly being extended into the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. Along with this, we have a two large slight risk, one centered over northeastern Oklahoma, and then another slight risk over here on the mid-Atlantic states and southeastern coast of the United States. The main threat for this is going to be a very large wind threat with a hatched 45% risk of wind on day two. You do not see that very often over our moderate risk area, undermining the threat for extremely destructive winds tomorrow. And over on our eastern coast risk area, we can see another slight risk of wind. This is mostly going to be driven by a line of storms out here. Our hatched 45% wind risk is also going to be accompanied by a hatched moderate hail risk, which highlights the possibility of large to extremely large hail out here in the Texas Panhandle all the way to southeastern and central Oklahoma. And then lastly, we have sort of a double-barreled threat for tornadoes tomorrow with two slight risk of tornadoes, one up here in the mid-Atlantic near Baltimore, and then one down here in our main risk area, extending from the Texas Panhandle all the way up into central Oklahoma. Then day three, it looks like we're going to see that weather pattern persist, with our main risk area moving southeasternly towards the Dixie Alley, along with a large marginal spanning all the way from western Texas all the way up into the northeast. Here's some of our simulated reflectivity today. As we can see, we have a large mesoscale convective system pushing easternward across Tennessee and northern Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, bringing the threat for strong winds, small hail, and a tornado or two. As we move further into the afternoon and evening, we can kind of see storms remature for a short time and then die off into the night hours with an enhanced area of spin up tornadoes up here in the northern section of the bow where the line kind of bends back on itself. But it appears that these areas will get a round two of storms into the night hours with a linear slash multi-cell slash embedded supercell sort of look to them, with actually a fairly decent tornado environment out here in the Birmingham area. These storms will also be capable of producing strong winds, some hail, and will actually have an enhanced risk of a tornado or two. These are expected to push through during the night hours and bring lots of rain to these areas. For our secondary risk area, it's up here in central to southeastern Missouri. This is going to be up here near that surface low and a warm front, kind of making the environment for storms more favorable up here, bringing the threat of wind and hail, and a very, very, very low threat of tornadoes. Lastly, our Texas Panhandle sector is expecting to see a couple of discrete storms fire up into the evening and night hours along our large cold front and dry line, bringing that threat for wind and hail. This sounding is from the later afternoon in northern Georgia in front of our mesoscale convective system. And immediately we notice that our hodograph is painting a picture that's not favorable for tornadoes and is more favorable for wind. Down here in our small analysis box, we can see that there's not a lot of surface SRH or low level shear. And there's actually not that much upper level shear, which is one of the reasons why these storms are kind of expected to deorganize later into the night. However, we do see pretty okay lapse rates with 7 Celsius decreasing per kilometer. We do see a pretty good dew point temperature gradient with very moist air. We see some drier loft helping with that lifting. And then we see pretty good cape, almost 4,000 surface cape in front of these storms, feeling that wind threat, non-zero tornado threat, and that risk for hail. And we see 1.73 inches of precipitable water, feeling that wind threat as well. Here is our weather sounding around Birmingham later tonight. And at first look, this photograph doesn't look super conducive for tornadoes or really all hazards of weather. There isn't that textbook big curve and then sort of elongation out. But there are quite a bit of kinks in here. And as we look at our surface SRH and low level shear, we actually see that there's over 150, around 175 surface helicity. And we do have sufficient low level shear out here in front of these storms later tonight. And even we do see not super high, but definitely enough deep level shear for these storms to organize, definitely enhancing that tornado threat around this area later tonight. Another thing we notice are low LCLs, a pretty good dew point temperature gradient with moist air. We still have good lapse rates with 7.4 Celsius decreasing per kilometer, and we still do see some of that drier loft helping with lift. However, we do see some stable air kind of creeping in, which is indicative of it being night, and that's just the nature of what happens during nocturnal cooling. But nevertheless, the environment for these storms is still going to have some juice with around 2,000 surface cape. And something else to note is the precipitable water is around 1.79 inches, increasing that wind threat later. And the last thing I want to point out is that our 3 cape is really high at around 130, which could help in increasing that threat for tornadoes and wind. Looking at our more long-term forecast, we're going to take a peek at the 500 millibar wind speeds from the European model, and we can see that we have westerly flow across the Mississippi River Valley, moving into the Dixie Alley today, providing that upper level forcing for our storms and maximizing around the afternoon. And then it kind of just sticks around out here, having more of that zonal flow look in front of our main weather causer for the next couple of days, this giant trough digging in up here, coupled with southwesterly flow in our main risk area, bringing that threat for that very large wind threat tomorrow. And this is going to stick around all the way through Monday and Tuesday and is going to continue to bring westerly flow and less severe weather up in these regions out east in the Texarkana, Oklahoma region. And then we'll continue to see southwesterly flow in the northern corner of the United States up here in the Midwest, talking North Dakota and Minnesota, possibly bringing those wind makers up here in this region yet again. And it looks like this area might have a cool down for a day or two, letting that environment sort of recover before we see our next big weather maker enter the region with another large trough digging in from the west up here. But this time it's going to be in the upper plains, talking North Dakota and Nebraska. And even though this is pretty far out, this actually looks pretty potent with a negative tilt, possibly bringing a threat for all hazards of severe weather and at that strong hazards. And after that departs, we get yet again another pretty potent looking trough taking on that negative tilt look and pretty solid jet speeds extending all the way from Texas up until the Great Lakes region, possibly bringing that all hazards and strong all hazards threat for severe weather yet again. So June is looking to be more active every day into the future we go, it seems.